Handelsman founded the Manhattan Loft Corporation in 1992, and he has transformed living in London then and again now through both the restoration of legacy buildings and through new high-rises, including the new Manhattan Loft Gardens, which is an incredible design. Thanks for coming to see us in London. Tell me, what inspired you to start the Manhattan Loft Corporation?
Well, it was the recession in 1992, and at that time, recession meant a lot of apartments were repossessed. So to do anything from fresh and new was almost an impossibility, because the cost of just refurbishing or building an apartment, you could actually go to other location and pay less for a repossessed apartment. So really, one had to come up with a new concept. I also have always been interested, having lived outside of London in the US and Canada and France, Belgium, Germany, Israel. I always have felt that cities shouldn't be or cities shouldn't be places where people work and then travel to come home. I think the center of towns could actually have could work very well with residential development as well. So even though there were residential developments in places like Mayfair, Belgravia, Knightsbridge, etc., but the city and the city fringe was very much a no man's land past a certain hour. People didn't live there, or at least people weren't active. So what I was offered is, I saw this amazing building. I wanted to buy it because I just thought the building was fantastic. And at the time, I had two options. I had the option either to create a museum for young British artists, which had just come onto the scene at the time. And perhaps it's a pity that I didn't do that, because I might have gotten a lot of art for rather inexpensive prices, now they're worth millions, and would have made far more money than developing it into residential apartments. Or the other option is come up with a new idea. And I always felt that giving the purchaser the opportunity to actually create their own space, as opposed to the space being dictated by a developer, I think is an interesting option. And it's not always practical. It's sometimes very difficult. But I thought it was challenging enough, and I think the building, with its floor-to-ceiling height and its location, was a perfect Art Deco building. So I thought it was very, very suitable for that kind of conversion.
Why did it take so long for loft apartments to come to London? Because they were going in America probably within the decade before. Why?
Probably
why
even earlier than the decade, but then from the 70s, probably 20 years earlier. It's a very good question. I think first of all, the two things that's happened. Even in America, when loft apartments went, they were done not by developers, they were done by individuals that wanted to live in a space, and therefore they bought the building because they just couldn't buy the space, and then they subsold what they weren't using to their friends, to their acquaintances, etc. So it was a phenomenon that was much more organic. In London, there were people that squatted in lofts, i.e. didn't have enough money. They were large warehouse buildings on the Thames that they decided, hey, I'm going to live there for free. But nobody really commercialized it, or no small there were no developers doing it. And I think it was just a pity. And indeed, the next question is, why did I call my company Manhattan Loft Corporation? Because the concept of loft living was non-existent in London at the time, except for those that had traveled. Obviously, people had been to New York and other places. But the reason I called it Manhattan Loft Corporation is because the loft, or the meaning of the word loft in the UK, is the attic, is what is above a house. So the reason I called it Manhattan Loft Corporation is because people say, what do you mean by Manhattan Loft Corporation? What are you talking about? As opposed to London Loft Corporation is, I was able to make references to films like Philadelphia, Ghost. Those are the films that came out. Have you seen those films? And you'd be surprised how many people that asked me the question had seen one of those two films and said, now I understand.
You are planning a namesake tower, the Manhattan Loft Gardens, which was actually designed by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. Quite a spectacular looking building, a double cantilevered tower for East London. It has 3 sky gardens and private flats, and we'll have a hotel. Where are we with this project right now?
Well, in terms of architects, we finished stage D, and now we're in stage E, i.e. when the final design, the detailed design from the architects. We are very pleased. I mean, it's been a true labor of love in terms of details. You know, we spend an enormous amount of time in order to get it absolutely right. We built a show suite for ourselves just to understand, are we happy with what we're seeing? As a development, it's probably going to be the most expensive tower ever built in the UK in terms of residential tower, that is. I think it's exceptionally aspirational. When I spoke to SOM at the beginning, I had to give them a brief, and I decided to give them a simple one because long briefs to architects never, sometimes get lost in translation. And I simply told them, build me the most beautiful tower in the world. And then I said, no, let's be slightly more specific, residential tower. And then I said, forget the world, because the world is a big place. So let's forget Asia, and let's forget the Middle East, because things are happening there on a constant evolving sort of basis, like it or not, but that's debatable. But let's stick to Europe and North America and possibly South America. And I think they came up with a design that meets those specifications.
So you didn't specify the cantilevers, and those are stunning, some of the spaces created by those.
I specified three things. I specified what I want a residential tower that works together with a hotel. I wanted to create a community out of my development. And I wanted to introduce the garden square, which is what the UK is really well known for. As a city planning, there are lots of gardens, in the city as opposed to other cities. I mean, in New York, you got Gramercy Park. You got larger parks, of course, like you have here as well, Hyde Park. But I think the garden square really acts as a catalyst for community to be able to interact, because you get the key to the garden in your square. Your neighbor, four buildings down, but also facing, also get the keys. And it's by this sort of interaction that you actually can become friends, etc. So I really wanted to see is how do we create from a kind of septic environment a community. And I felt very much that those cantilevers, albeit at a great cost, are an opportunity to really give an identity to a building that will make it incredibly special, again, at an expense, but it will really introduce a lifestyle which is second to none.
Well, and to give people a place that they want to go in the building that anybody can go to?
The gardens are restricted to the residents. Obviously,
Okay.
we come to visit them. And the beauty of having three gardens, everyone sort of caters to a different kind of atmosphere, different kind of lifestyle. For the moment, that doesn't mean to say you won't enjoy all three of them, but during the course of a day or a month or whatever it is. But they're all quite specific. And, if you find yourself in a garden where you don't like the people that seem to be being there, you've got option to go to two others.
Is super tall anything that you have ever been tempted to try?
When you refer to 42 stories, about 200 stories instead of 42 stories?
I'm talking about 300, 350, 400 meters. Ever get the temptation to do something like that?
For me, it's not a question of temptation. For me, if there's a function, if there's a use, if it makes sense, of course I'm tried. I wanna see what are the boundaries of the possibility, but I don't want it to become an egocentric kind of thing. I built the tallest tower in the world. I couldn't care less. I'd rather build the Eiffel Tower than the tallest tower in the world.
The Loft living in London, you're created or credited with creating the Harry effect, which you've changed the way a lot of people live in London and have brought lofts to this part of the world. Is that still an ongoing thing? Is this move into the Manhattan Loft Gardens kind of a step up, and that now you're doing new buildings? Are we phasing into something else now?
No, I mean, to be fair, I did a 33-story tower in 2001, which was the tallest residential tower in London by Canary Wharf. And again, what I decided to do over there, just to be different to the market, is Canary Wharf, banking, a lot of it American. And what I simply decided to do is bring the best of American opportunities of development into London. And what does that mean? That means one-bedroom apartments instead of being 500-600 square feet, because that is the sort of norm. It's a capital expenditure. Let's make it 800-900 square feet. To give it much bigger. So I have done new build before. I think over here, I mean, the reason I'm calling also Manhattan Loft Gardens is I never called any of my buildings by my name. And I will say I'm very proud of many of the ones that I've done, because they were all very considerate, they were all careful. I think they were successful, be it St. Pancras as the most fantastic or one of the most important buildings in the UK. we spend a lot of time doing it. It would be difficult to call it the Harry Tower to St. Pancras. I don't think English Heritage might have a thing to say. But I did other developments, be it in Seoul, be it in Bankside, be it at Canary Wharf. I think the reason I did it over here is because I was challenged by the name. What am I going to call it? So the reason of calling it Manhattan Loft Gardens was, rightly or wrongly, but once upon a time, certainly Manhattan was aspirational. It could have been as early as the 30s, but it was an aspiration of really creating great buildings in Manhattan. And I think if you come in from JFK and you look at the skyline, I think you do see some amazing buildings, and quite a number of them are residential. So Manhattan is sort of the aspiration of quality, work quality thing. I'm not saying everything in Manhattan is great, because I don't think it is.
I'll tell you, I will ask you.
But just very finish. Loft, because from the 25th floor onwards, we're introducing double height, 1.5 story height thing. Gardens, because I'm introducing garden. So that is why the thing of Manhattan Loft Gardens.
I will ask you finally, we are sitting here in London amidst a group of new buildings in the financial district, the Gherkin, the Shard, and just really an eclectic blend. What do you think of when you see that, and what does that tell you? How do those buildings speak to you about the future of London and about what you're doing?
I think it certainly talks about aspiration, which I think is a very positive thing. I believe that some of those buildings might just be statements, and if one looks at the practical effect of some of them, I think buildings, it's really important for buildings to be successful, that they look great from the outside and that they work from the inside. Some of that might be debatable in some of the buildings.
Well, thanks very much for dropping by to see us
Pleasure.
here in London 2013. Harry Handelsman from the Manhattan Loft Corporation.